recording this. So I'll probably, after I show this PowerPoint today, I'll probably take it back out because I'm going to make some more changes to it. But you'll see should be the next term I have in there is fascism. So really, in the study guide, for fascism, I want you to have the beliefs, just those really core beliefs, how it's similar to communism, but also different, similar that they're both authoritarian governments, both have control over the economy, but fascism, it's a more conservative form of authoritarianism. History is good, tradition is good, social hierarchy is good. When that's done, you'll see I've got those next three terms, Reichstag fire, enabling law, and Night of the Long Knives. So Amber and Ashley, you two, you answered those questions yesterday. They talked about those events in the documentary. I've linked an article into the study guide, and if one of you, the three of you want to decide which one you'll take, so you'll need to answer. First one is the Reichstag fire enabling law, and then so you guys care if you pick one? So if you open up, if you open up this article, you'll see there's like a section on the enabling law, a section on Night of the Long Knives, and then up at the top will be up here would be the Reichstag fire. So pick one. Ashley, which one do you want to do? Okay. Enabling law. What? Okay. So you'll do the Reichstag fire. So read that, and then what I want you guys to do is shorten that into basically a sentence that we can put into the study guide. So basically, you guys are creating what we'll put into the study guide. So read your section, and then we'll put it into the study guide. All right, we done. So, Wade, what did you find important about the Reichstag fire? What was it, first of all? Their Capitol building, right? So Capitol building is burned down. So Nazis blame the communists. Who actually gets convicted of the crime? There's a communist guy. I think historians are a little bit divided on if there's evidence that he actually did it. There's agreement that the Nazis blew it completely out of proportion. They used it to their advantage, like you said, and they blame all the communists. They basically blame communists or any of their political opponents, because how many people ended up getting arrested for it? Yeah. Another thing to think about is there were undoubtedly communists who were targeted by this, and there may have been people who were not communists that the Nazis lumped in and said, "Hey, there's evidence against you. You have connections with these people." And now the Dutch communists, like you said, I don't really know the evidence they brought against him. I think historians are divided. But the communists in general were blamed. I know we've got no Animal Farm, but doesn't that kind of sound familiar to when the windmill was destroyed? And we don't know what the evidence was for the windmill being destroyed, but right away Napoleon blames Snowball, right? Who cares if there's evidence? Blame your political opponent. And, it really created a sense of panic within Germany. Look at what happened when the Capitol building was just stormed a few years ago. I mean, that was a big enough deal. Just imagine if it had been burned to the ground. Like, take the riot at the Capitol, take that times, 100. Think of the panic that would have been going on. So, that leads into the enabling law, right, Ashley? Now, the documentary called The Enabling Act, I've usually seen it written as The Enabling Act, but the article called The Enabling Law. So, what would you say is the need to know for the test? Well, you said it gave him the power to carry out laws. If the enabling law had not been passed, how would laws need to be passed? How would this? Who actually passed the enabling law? What? Reichstag, which was the parliament. Parliament passed it. Because remember, this is a parliamentary democracy at the time. That parliament would be the legislative body, very similar to our Congress, right? So he has to get he needs to get the Reichstag, the parliament, to pass this. Why do you recall how many votes he needed or what percentage? What percentage of the Reichstag he needed to have? Well, that's what it that's it passed 444 to 94. He had to get 2/3 of a majority to get passed. So yeah, it allowed Hitler to pass whatever laws he wanted, but what did it have to do to accomplish that? Okay, it doesn't actually have it in there, but yeah, like you said, he didn't need the Reichstag or the president, but it suspended the Constitution, is what it did. We could say law. Passed by the Reichstag. I would say which suspended the Constitution. Now, it puts Hitler in a good position because Hitler was Chancellor of Germany. I'll explain that a little more here in a second. So once that law is passed, because that was written within the German Constitution, it said that in a state of emergency, a law may be passed which suspends the Constitution. When that's done, Hitler, because he was Chancellor, he was basically he was like the kind of like president of the Reichstag. There was the president of the country, which was Hindenburg. We don't really have an equivalent to it in our country because, it would be like if there was a president of Congress, and we don't have that. We have a president, but no singular leader of Congress. It's a little bit different in a parliamentary system. They basically have two executive leaders. They have a president and then a chancellor. So then finally, these are kind of steps to how Hitler is going to gain ultimate control. Amber, what happens during the Night of the Long Knives? Yeah, they take out some of their political opponents. Do they stop with the SA? How does it ultimately end? And they're ultimately going to target basically any political opponents, not just the SA. Because it talks about while the purge focused on the SA, the Nazis also used the event to eliminate other political opponents. Really anyone who was going to be a threat to Hitler's power. So let's see, how would we word that? How did you word that in how they went after Rome and the SA? What do we say? Nazis, let's just say eliminated SA and other political opponents. When we say eliminated, most of them are going to be executed, shot point blank range on the spot. I'm going to go through a few slides before I start that episode. we'll kind of go through, kind of recap what we watched. So really, it's important to think about what was Germany like post-World War I. And these are really, those bullet points out there are provisions of the Treaty of Versailles. Well, Germany loses territory. They lose all their colonies. They had colonies in Africa and in Asia. They lose all those. They lose a lot of territory within Europe as well. There's portions like the Sudetenland that they have to give up to Czechoslovakia, and they have to cede land to Poland. They reduce the size of their military to only 100,000 personnel. What it means to demilitarize parts of the country, so there was an area in the Rhineland and I believe the Saar region they could not send troops to. Now the Rhineland, it would have been up against the border with France. Now Germany and France had been at war in World War I. So imagine telling a country, you cannot send troops to the border of a country you were just at war with. I mean, let's say if there was another war, wouldn't that give a huge advantage to France? They could mass their soldiers right up along the border, and Germany could not oppose them. Because international law said they could not send troops there. Then there were these coal reserves in the Saar. They had to give to France. It would be like Canada coming into the United States and just taking our resources for free. They had to do that. They had to give it up. And most notably, they have to pay those heavy war reparations because everyone blamed Germany for starting the war. So when we talk about Hitler being the chancellor and everything, that was within this government called the Weimar Republic that was put in place after World War I, after the German Empire had been overthrown. Now, I'll try to explain that so this enabling law might make a little more sense. I'll go back. That might make more sense to do the Weimar Republic first. So it's a parliamentary democracy, somewhat similar to our form of government. The legislative branch, remember, the legislative branch is always the branch of government that passes laws. That was the Reichstag. Kind of like our Congress, there are some differences. So, for example, it talked about in the past episodes the number of votes the Nazis would receive. So how a parliamentary system works is you don't vote for politicians. Like in the Reichstag, you would have voted for a party. And if the Nazi party got 10% of the vote, they would hold 10% of the seats in the Reichstag. Does that make sense? Your representation is based on what percentage of the votes you got. A lot of people think that's a better system than what we have today because we have a winner take all. If a Democratic politician beats a Republican candidate 51% to 49%, they will be the representative of either that whole state or that whole district. It's a winner take all. Some people think that parliamentary system is better. The executive branch was shared between a president and a chancellor. The president really had more power. He was voted for by the people, and then he would appoint the chancellor. And the chancellor was supposed to be in charge of the Reichstag. So remember, the Reichstag is a legislative body. They create the laws. They have to pass laws that are constitutional because Germany had a constitution just like we did. What Hitler was able to achieve is if he could get the Constitution repealed, or if he could get the Constitution suspended, then it would ultimately fall on him, being Chancellor and the person in charge of the Reichstag. He could pass whatever laws he really wanted because he had that influence over the Reichstag. Okay, so then the Nazi Party, which has really been a lot of the focus on the episodes we've watched, Interestingly enough, it begins as the German Workers' Party. It was supposed to help empower the working class, somewhat reminiscent of what the communists were trying to do. And it then becomes the National Socialist German Workers' Party, also known as the Nazi Party. They are extremely fascist. That is a fascist party. And really, how it begins at first is it's not so much anti-Semitic or against the Jews like Hitler turns it into, not even so much anti-communist. Hitler's going to bring in those anti-Semitic, anti-communist beliefs. He brings them into the party. But how it really begins is they're very opposed to the Treaty of Versailles and they're opposed to the Weimar Republic because they see this Weimar Republic as being a phony government put in place by the Treaty of Versailles. Now, out of everything we've watched, I mean, if you're a typical German person, German citizen, how has the Treaty of Versailles treated you?
20s, they had it pretty nice.
They had it nice for a little while, but even despite the short time of success in the 20s that they had, what are those war reparations doing to the economy? And it's really hurting the economy. I mean, look at what had been in the Treaty of Versailles. Do you think very many Germans liked the Treaty of Versailles? They had to give up territory. They were blamed for the war. They had to pay war reparations. They are allowing France to come in and take resources. If you're a German citizen, how do you feel about that? So, I mean, can you see how this party seems seems appealing to a lot of Germans? It's the Nazi Party that emerges, later in the 30s. Is really not how it begins. A lot of people were sucked into it before it became the party of the Holocaust. All right, so that's what we watched yesterday in the Reichstag fire, and then the Enabling Act, Night Long Knives. So we're now around 1933, 1934. I think when I start playing